You know, almost rebellious to something. He kept like switching up, like what she was, how she was. So you guys still playing? The whole time it sucks. We just never played her. It was insane. You're such a sweet information. Insane. Kids are trying to take notes, but he was just taking notes. Take yourself an alleyway. E2 in X3 on the main check. Yeah, I saw you and I was like, I think I'm
Yeah. I'm so glad. Thank you for being this. It's always changing. So
I saw that they're using what you used
constantly. Technology.
Hey everyone, welcome to
We're gonna get started.
joining us at B-Sides 2023. I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Michael-Angelo Zummo. Michael-Angelo is he'll be giving his presentation titled "Going Undercover in the Underground: A Practical Guide on How to Safely Infiltrate and Engage." You're welcome to ask questions throughout, and without further ado, take it away.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for everybody for coming. I'm Zummo. I know there's a lot of talks that go on right now, so I really appreciate all of you that have decided to come to my talk. My talk is very practical, so I plan to leave you with something that you can actually do on your own. Because this is a dark web talk, I don't encourage you to do so, but I am going to provide you some tips on how to protect yourselves. And then for the enterprises and the companies in the room, I'll show you how you can automate this and make your team's lives a lot easier when trying to extract threats that we're commonly coming across in the underground. So I'm Zummo. I presented at B-Sides St. Pete last year. I'm pretty new to Florida. I've recognized a few faces. I think some of you were at my talk in St. Pete. If you were, raise your hand. I thought I saw a couple of people. Someone over here maybe, but maybe I'm wrong. But my talk last year was all about threat hunting. And one of the questions that I got out of all the conferences I went to last year was, well, how do you even start? How do you get access to these underground sources, and how do you extract intelligence from them to actually perform the threat hunting that I was teaching about last year? So that's where this talk's about. I am going to show you a little bit of threat hunting still, so that again you can apply some of this to your own work and your daily activities. But this is mostly going to be about how do we get started. So the agenda, and based on your questions, we might even talk about more than just what's on here. But I'm going to show you how to set up your dark web environment or your underground environment using tools like Tails, for example, OS system. You can also use a virtual machine. My go-to is Tails. We're going to talk about how to find those sources. We're going to talk about how to get access to those different sources, and then creating your own persona safely by disassociating it from yourself, protecting yourselves while you're online, and engaging with these types of threat actors. How to communicate with them, and basically we're just going to model our persona based on what threat actors are already doing. And then we're going to just do some threat hunting. And if we have time, he's going to give me a hands up at 30 minutes. If we have some time, I got something very cool at the end for you. So first, what is the dark web? I know like dark web is one of those terms almost where like when you hear AI or ML, you're like, oh, okay. But really, the dark web is just anything that is not indexed by your search engines. Sources that require a special browser to get access to, tools like Tor, I2P, or ZeroNet. When we talk about the dark web, we're really talking about the underground, because some of you might be familiar with like breach forums. Breach forums just went down. There's a new forum called, I think it's called like Pwn forums now or something that's kind of taken its place. It looks exactly like Breach, and Breach looked exactly like raid forums. Those weren't dark web forums. Those are clear. You can get access to that with Google. It's very easy to get access to, but they're underground because the types of threat actors you're dealing with on those sources, types of data that's on there, types of threats that we're extracting every single day, every single minute from those types of places. So when we talk about dark web, we're really talking about the underground, which includes those clear web sources. Of course, it includes the deep and the dark web. And then also includes messaging platforms like Telegram, QQ, Discord even. You see a lot of fraud on those types of platforms where threat actors are selling credit cards, vulnerabilities, 0 days, things like that. So today you're going to hear me say the underground a lot, and that's what I'm referring to. Again, I'm trying to leave you with something practical, something you guys can actually do on your own. So because of that, I have to give you some precautions. These sources are inherently bad. Now, there are some sources that are hosted on Tor that have no criminal activity on, but the sources I'm talking about are malicious. You have threat actors that are on there trying to exploit you, trying to exploit your companies, trying to exploit anybody that's on there that's stupid enough to click on a link that they don't know where it goes. So because of that, I need to caution you all if you do try this on your own. As you can see here, I have an example of a threat actor that was sharing a tool himself, and it just said, hey, by the way, you need to be careful when you're downloading tools from other threat actors, cracking tools and things like that, because threat actors are loading malicious programs into these tools. And while you're trying to take advantage of others, they're taking advantage of you. My go-to tool when I'm accessing sources, when I'm maintaining my personas, is using Tails. Tails is a very light OS. It has amnesia, so every time you power it down, it erases itself. You can put it on a small thumb drive, 8 gigabytes is all you need. It provides you secure computing anywhere, so you can plug it into whatever device really and boot it up. They have it for even mobile devices now. And it's going to protect you. It's going to protect your network. It's going to protect all your other devices, because as soon as you unplug that, it wipes itself. As long as you don't store any of the data, any of your own data, or connect it to real live data or real personas, then you should be okay. But it's not magic. You still need to be careful and not log into other sites when you're also log into your official accounts when you're also logging into underground sources. I have a video because I'm using their device. The videos aren't working, but don't worry, I have a backup. So I want to show you of the startup. You guys see that? Okay. So this is just a startup of Tails. It's very simple. It's very lightweight. And when you log in, you can see I'm logging in here. It's got very minimal resources on it, and it's all about just maintaining your anonymity so that you can protect yourselves against these threat actors. Reporters use this when they're overseas, when they're behind enemy lines, trying to communicate with the outside world, when there's human rights issues going on and stuff like that. This is what Tails is for. Protects you when you're engaging in malicious activity or suspicious activities, things like that. So let's go back into my presentation here. Cool. All right, so finding sources. Finding sources, especially on Tor or the dark web, is not exactly, you can't exactly Google these sources. There are some that are indexed and you can get quick links to, again, breach forums, raid forums when that was around, the new PWN forum, same thing. You can find those sources easily. But finding sources, really, it requires you to have an in with threat actors to communicate with them and figure out, well, where are you guys going? Where are you guys selling data? Where are you guys sharing malware, exploits, all that type of stuff? That's where you find the real sources where the real threats exist. And I have a couple of examples here of different types of sources. We have forums. This is Crack's forum. This forum, excuse my language, is a real pain in the ass because it's a high maintenance forum where you need to be active to really kind of get the threats out of there. But again, you can access this on Google. It's very simple. You have credit card markets. These come and go every single day, it seems like. These are just marketplaces where threat actors are selling your compromised cards. You have all-purpose or miscellaneous marketplaces where they're selling everything from fake IDs to narcotics. By the way, I was previously Marine Corps intelligence for national security. I also worked in law enforcement, taking down dark web narcotics dealers, things like that. So there are a ton of these markets, and they come and go all the time as the FBI and other agencies are taking them down. But when they get taken down, another one is in their place. Initial access brokers for the enterprises in the room, you're probably very familiar with these. This is one of those threats that is on everybody's minds nowadays. These are marketplaces that use stealer programs to infect your users' machines. And as those users are logging into their accounts, or they're just stealing them directly from the browser, it captures their account details and then sells them for very cheap on these markets. We call them initial access brokers because it provides that initial access into your network for sometimes as low as $1. So I have an example I'll show you later, but think about like the Uber breach. Those breaches like that started from marketplaces like this, where any threat actor can go in, put in a domain, find Uber, an account to Uber, and buy it for $1. And then they can see what kind of damage once they have access. And then you have messaging platforms, as I mentioned earlier, Telegram. There's tens of thousands of these, I mean, more than that, but tens of thousands that my own company's monitoring already, where we have threat actors, again, selling zero-day exploits, selling fraudulent items, credit cards, things like that. But again, finding these sources is it's not like you can just Google. You need to stay up to date. And when it comes to dark web sources, you need an exact onion address to get access to that source. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to access it. You're not even going to be able to find it. And because it's a dark web, they're constantly changing these addresses. So once you're in, it's not like you're done, you're good, you're going to be able to collect intelligence from that source all the time. No, you need to stay up to date. As that site changes its address, you need to be aware of it so that your collection remains constant. As I mentioned, some of those sources are actually indexed by other websites out there, but when it comes to those, it's really just about those narcotic sites, child exploitation sites. Those are the ones that you can Google, and you can find a place like Hidden Wiki, the Shadow Wiki, or Dark Eye, where they maintain links and tell you whether or not a source is up or down. But those hacking sources, some I'll show in a little bit, places like Ramp forums, there's a very prominent Chinese and Russian hacking forum. You're not gonna be able to Google that. You need to be in with the threat actors to know how to get to that source, and then you have to go through the step of actually getting access to it. Here's another example of in a forum post where threat actors often share the links to the sources that they are active on. And in this case, you have a threat actor that shared the Telegram channel where they're often selling data leaks, sharing tools, things like that. That's how we identify these sources. And then we get in, see what types of threats exist on there, and then extract all that intelligence from those sources. For sources, this is just one of the many barriers of actually extracting the intel from these sources. Again, the first barrier is finding them. Now you actually have to register them. And this is where that persona management is going to come into play. But also, you have to know threat actors to either invite you to a source, give you an invite link. Sometimes you need to pay your way in. The example here, this is Genesis Forum. Oh, I'm sorry, Genesis Market. This is another marketplace, initial access broker, where they sell accounts. I have a little bit of pride in this one because this is one that I gained an invite to through my personas, I think like 3 years ago now. This one has kind of dropped off a little bit. Russian market, which we'll talk about, is way more popular than this one is because they sell things for a bit cheaper. But this is an example where threat actors had to invite me to the source, and I had to provide that invite code to actually get access. And then once we got the access, we're able to duplicate it and start extracting intel from there. I mentioned Ramp forums. This is another forum. You need to be verified by admins on the site, or you need to pay a hefty fee to get access to it. I would never encourage you to pay a fee to get access to a source because you never know if they're actually going to give you that access or not. So if you're sponsored by your company, you're spending their money, that's okay. As long as you're but don't spend any of your own money to get access to these sources. Pay a vendor or have your company do it for you. Because I've been burned plenty of times where I pay money and I don't ever hear from the threat actor again. But again, it wasn't my money, so I didn't care. But there are sources like that that exist. And these are the sources that everybody's trying to get access to because that's where the intel exists. That's where they're sharing these 0 days and the banking malware, the cracking programs, all that type of stuff. That's where they're selling it, and that's where we need to get intelligence. I mentioned Crack Swarm, it's a pain in the ass, and it's because this is a forum, which is actually a good design, where they require you to actually engage in the forum to be able to get something out of the forum. So forums, again, they're like Reddit. Think of it of Reddit. I'm sure everybody knows what Reddit is. There's topics. You click on a topic, you can see the thread, right? Most of those forums, you can click on any topic and see what threat actors are talking about. But for cracks, you can only see them if you're actually participating or providing something to the community of that forum. So oftentimes, I'm digging back into old projects I did during my master's. I'm like, breaking code and sharing that. Like, oh, here's how you hash something or something like that to make sure that I can maintain that access. But it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to keep that status on the site. And it's just another barrier that you have to get around when you're dealing with these types of sources. Then you also have language barriers. Exploit, forum exploit. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that one. It's a very popular one. Mostly Russian threat actors, though some of them are actually kind and they also post in English for you, so you don't have to translate it or paste it into Google or whatever. But then you also have Chinese sources as well. Very difficult to extract intel from. And translation tools are great, but if a threat actor has particularly bad grammar, you're going to notice it. You might still get the gist of things, but you're going to miss that exact translation. And then you have VIP sections within those forums themselves. So sometimes getting access isn't all the access that you actually need. You need to then prove your status. You need to build a reputation to get access to the VIP sections where some of the top threat actors are actually communicating and sharing the intel that you're looking for. So now we're going to create our first persona. And there's some guidelines here. You got minimum requirements. You need to set up an email, a burner email. I use Proton Mail. Proton Mail is actually they're kind of a pain because they want you to start paying. But it is a great burner email to use. It's also a great email just to use personal if you want to set up something where all your spam goes. Password managers, do not make the mistakes that I've made over the years where you use the same password for all of your dark web forums. And one of those forums gets taken over, and then they find out your credentials and they wipe everything on it, or they take over all your accounts. Don't do that. Use a password manager. Your persona needs to be completely isolated from the real you. You cannot be logging into your Chase account the same time you're logging into Forum Rant. You can't do that. And same with your work accounts. And you also, my recommendation is you also, build a new language style. Don't write the same way on a forum that you would in an email to your coworkers. Say slang terms, come up with a new style, because you don't want a threat actor to come to a talk like mine and be like, you know what, that guy sounds familiar. And then all of a sudden they're digging into your profiles and they're like, I think this is him. Set up PGP, open PGP. This is a good way of gaining a threat actor's trust because some of the top threat actors still use PGP to verify each other to gain that trust. And sometimes they'll only share the most sensitive information when it is encrypted. And I got a tutorial for you on that one because that's a little bit more of a challenge. Jabber is also a very common form of communication. I'll show you that. And then, of course, Telegram. Good on time so far? So good?
Yeah.
All right. So my first persona, this is me. This is Pitiful. My Proton address is pitiful@proton.me. My Jabber is pitiful@xmpp.jp. On forums, you'll see me as Pitiful. And this is real. You'll actually see this. My Telegram is @pitiful. Here's my PGP fingerprint. Oh, and that was it. I thought I had another. Guess not. But that's me. This is my persona. You will actually see this persona, and threat actors know I have plenty of personas, trust me. But threat actors know that this is a security research. They know this is not somebody that they trust. But if you went on to any of the forums I just showed you, you will see my logo there and the stupid threads that I engage in. But how do I create them? I model them off of real threat actors. And what I do is I use my own tool, Cybersixgill's portal, where we're collecting all this data every single day, 10 million plus items a day, tracking all these threat actors. I use our own tool to quickly analyze and figure out what are threat actors doing today? What communication methods are they using? So I'm able to pick a threat actor like Jack Lowe here from a carding forum, a forum that does a lot of different things, but their focus is selling credit card dumps, compromised cards, things like that. And you can see Jack Lowe uses an XMPP or a jabber. He uses Telegram. He or she, I don't know who it is. And then you can see all their different aliases across forums here. Maybe I can highlight it for you, but it's this right here, aliases on the bottom right. So I look for threat actors like that and I say, okay, this is how they're communicating. I need to replicate that. I need to look like that so I can gain the trust of threat actors. And as you can see, I'm able to ensure that I am capturing as much information as possible. I can search across all these different sources at once by using their Jabber, using their Telegram address to see, all right, where is this threat actor using these communication methods? And you can see these are all different sources here. Altanin, Carvilla, Cracking Gal, Greek hacking. These are all sources that this threat actor is active on using these different communication methods. So that's how I model myself and when I'm building my own personas. You can see here's an example of the same threat actor on a forum. I forget what forum this is, but it's pretty recent, back in May, where they were even using Gmail or Outlook, which always kind of, again, I come from law enforcement space after the military, so when I was dealing with narcotics dealers, if I saw they were using the Gmail or an Apple or something, I would just subpoena that information to figure out who it is. So it's hilarious when I see them using accounts like that. But Telegram Jabber, there's like almost no way to figure out who that is unless they reveal some other details about themselves. So we're going to set up our modes of communication. By the way, at the end of this, there's going to be a QR code. There's going to be two. There's one to my LinkedIn. There's going to be another to my Drive, where a lot of the things you see here, the presentation will be in there, so you can take it. There's also going to be tutorials in there as well. So a lot of these things, if you're taking pictures, that's fine, great, but you'll have access to a lot of this afterwards. So we're going to set up our modes of communication. We got private messaging. These are just the ways to communicate on the forums themselves, the marketplaces. They usually have their own messaging. We're going to set up our Jabber. We're going to set up our Telegram, and we're going to set up our PGP. And I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of all of these methods. So first one, Telegram. This is the easiest one, relatively easy, because again, we do not want to have our threat actor Telegram account on our personal devices, right? We don't want to use our real phone numbers for our Telegram account. So you need a burner phone, which is pretty simple. I mean, it's pretty easy to set up a burner account these days. But as you can see here, I'm having a conversation. This is a real investigation I was doing, where a threat actor was selling Stealer logs, and that bubble on the bottom is me talking to them. But there are several pros and cons of Telegram. One, it's easy to use and search through, so you can find threat actors pretty easily, and it's easy to go unnoticed if you join a group. There are these groups out there where, again, it's just a feed of dumps, data dumps, credentials, malicious programs that they're sharing, and you could just sit in there and consume all that information and never have to say a thing. They won't even know you're there. Sometimes they do, I guess they do their own versions of audits and they'll kick people out that haven't participated, but you just join right back up. It's pretty simple. The cons are, there are so many groups out there, and a lot of them have similar names. Threat actors have similar names. So when you search, like, if you search for Pitiful on there, you'll probably just find me. But there's a chance if you search somebody else's moniker, you're going to have 1,000 others with the same one. And you're like, man, which one is this? So that could be the challenge with Telegram. And it's also very volatile. Again, some of these sources, they get brought up, they get a lot of momentum, the first couple of weeks, and then they die off. and then you have to find the next one to extract intel out. Private messaging. This is a very easy form. Again, this is on the sources themselves. And a lot of the threat actors use them. They're frequently used, again, on all the major sources. Breach, I made this presentation a few months ago. Breach was just taken down, so I need to update this. But null, exploit, the hub, all of them have their own private messaging. And some of them even just have a chat box now. The cons are, the threat actors can save your conversations. So they can use that to expose you later on. I have seen, and maybe some of you have seen it, other threat intel vendors get exposed and threat actors will literally create a post saying, hey, threat intel vendor, I know you're on here. Here's all the chats I have with you. Here's the monikers, and they alert them to all the other users. That happens. And as I mentioned, threat actors can flag you to everybody else without even knowing, so that threat actors won't trust you on that site, and you're not going to get anything out of it. I have some examples, I believe. These are some examples of private messaging. Another con of private messaging that I didn't have on there is you need to log into the source daily to know if you get a notification. You could have it sent to your email, but again, you risk a little bit of exposure there, linking accounts together, which you don't necessarily want. But you need to, if you message somebody, you're gonna have to log in every day or however frequently you want to see, have they responded yet? Because that's really the only way you're gonna know. Then you have Jabber. Jabber is pretty easy to create and to remain anonymous. You don't have to link any accounts to it, which is pretty nice, especially if you're someone like me that needs to create a lot of accounts pretty frequently. And you can communicate with TAs regardless of what server that they're using or what site that they're on. If they're a threat actor on exploit, but you're not in exploit yet, but you have a Jabber and you know they're Jabber, you can still communicate with them. Probably they're not going to trust you unless you actually have a profile on exploit, but you can at least try. The cons are sometimes it's difficult to reach them because it's depending on what application you're using with Jabber. I use Pigeon. You might not always have it on, especially if you're using Tails or something. Tails is not always powered on. You unplug it when you're done. So you can miss messages. And some Jabber servers are inconsistent, meaning sometimes they go down. You can lose your chat history if you're saving it, things like that. This is an example. I blurred out a lot of it because this was actually from one of my sensitive personas where I'm communicating on Jabber with a threat actor for a bank. It was a French bank, a client of mine, and they were selling this bank's data. And I was communicating with the threat actor to try to figure out, did they sell this data to anybody yet? And if not, how much were they selling it for? And then whether or not we can acquire it. So this is a real example. And you can see it's pretty basic form of format. Some recommendations, again, this is going to be available in the drive if you guys access that later, but just a little like setup because it does take a little bit more setup than others. There's a list of Jabber servers. I use XMPP.jp is the most consistent one that I've come across, but there are hundreds, thousands others out there that you can use. And then the application that I use to communicate on Jabber is Pigeon. But again, there's a bunch of other ones you can use, whatever application that you want to use your Jabber account. You can even use it on a phone now. BGP, probably the most difficult one, but also the most secure. And meaning, one, you're the only one that has access to your keys, as long as you are protecting them. And only the recipient can decrypt that key or that message. And the benefit of this is that sometimes you get the most sensitive information or the real intel that you're looking for because threat actors really trust this method of communication. The cons are it's difficult. It takes longer to communicate. And if you lose your key, you lose your messages. Don't be me. Use your password managers. If you lose that key, you are never going to decrypt those messages again. And I have an example here as well to show you what communicating via PGP looks like. Can you see that okay? Yeah, it's a little small, but so here I am copying a threat actor's public key because you need their key to be able to communicate with them. So this is their public key. I'm using Cleopatra. I have a tutorial for this. I am uploading their key to create an identity for them or an account for them. I am telling them I love them. Thank you for the dumps, that got dumps from them. I am now going to encrypt this message with their public key. Using my secret key and their public key, I am encrypting this message, picking their account right now. Once I hit next, I've encrypted the message now. I'm going to paste it to my, it's copied to your clipboard. I'm going to paste it over this. That's the encrypted message now. So now you give this to the threat actor and they'll decrypt it with their private key and they'll see that I love them and I'm grateful for the dumps. And then you do the same exact thing if they send you a message back. They need your public keys. Yes, every time you have to do that. Every time you communicate with them. We good on time? We're at 30, I think now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 21.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. All right, so now we're gonna put it all together. We got access to the sources, right? We've created our personas quickly. It's gonna take you guys longer, trust me. So it'll be a long time, still doing it. But now we're gonna kind of put it all together and we're gonna figure out how do we extract the threats from these sources now. So we're gonna do some threat hunting. And all threat hunting is a constant game of cat and mouse, trying to find the threats before they've realized in your own networks. I am a threat hunter for Underground, so I am an external threat hunter. I'm not reviewing logs, I'm not looking for anomalies within our network, thank you. Anything like that. I am looking for threats from external sources, so that's what we're gonna do. And the common threats that you're gonna come across are initial access, phishing, supply chain compromise, valid accounts for sale, insider threats, fraud, data leaks, and many, many more. But these are kind of the main ones. Vulnerabilities I would put in there as well. So what's the problem with manual threat hunting? It's time consuming. You deal with barriers like CAPTCHAs. These are the ways that sources try and keep you out, especially if you're collecting information from them. You get put in queues. So if you're trying to perform a threat hunt because your company's making you do so, or there's an incident, now you gotta wait in lines just to get access to a source that might not even have the intel that you're looking for. Here's another way. This is like the impossible one to figure out. They come up with these like crazy ones. This one I'll fail every time. I'll get locked out. And then you have sites that just, they're not active anymore. You lose everything that you had on that site, to include your account and all the information, all the communication you had with that threat actor. So you have to search for each source individually. You possibly risk exposing yourself or your company's assets. And then you add the risk by actually searching on those sources for the intel that you're looking for. So I'm going to use an example, and this, I hope Racetrack's not in the room. Anyone? I thought I saw a hand go up. I'm like, oh God, sorry. But Racetrack, I'm sure you're all familiar with, was hit by the clock group back in July. Back in July, at least, tens of gigabytes were made public on their leak site, which is not uncommon. All their victims end up on their leak site. I'm not picking on Racetrack, but they're a good example for me. And in the data that they shared, they included employee tax information, financial records, customer data, rewards accounts. And this one was kind of unique because Clop was getting annoyed that companies weren't paying the ransom. So they're like, okay, we're going to reach out to your customers. So they reached out directly to the customers to let them know that they had Racetrack's data, and that just further destroyed the brand, if anybody actually cared. So my job is to figure out, well, how did they get access in the first place, and could we have told them before the ransomware attack happened? So we're going to combine our persona management, we're going to get access to the sources, and we're going to extract that sort of intel. And again, one of the most common threats, initial access, data dumps, leaked credentials coming from the underground. So I look for leaked credentials, and I'm pulling this directly from my data lake at Cybersixgill, and I'm looking for any racetrack credential in the past month. And you can see all these employee emails that were compromised by Stealer programs. I blurred it out. I do want to protect people. But as you can see, all these are coming from racetrack back when I did this presentation. So this was all from January timeframe. What else can I find? Well, I can look across my entire data, like all these sources at once, instead of having to log into each individual source, get put in a queue, get blocked, get banned, or whatever the case might be. And I could see that there was mentions of racetrack or racetrack.com or racetrack's data on all of these sources just in a month's time frame. And you can see some of those sources had as much as 62 mentions within a month. And then you have, again, there's I think there's like 15 here or something like that. I can't count that. There was 150 total mentions just in that month time frame. I could go back 2 years to see what their exposure was. I cared most about what was the most recent exposure they had. But you can see just a quick search, I'm able to find the sources that actually have the data rather than wasting time logging into a source, checking if there's data, there's not, going to the next one, so on and so forth. I can also get access to the files that actually have these sources, extract all the data, and then during that process, not only can I find the data that's for racetrack, but I might also find other data that belongs to other users or other organizations and let them know, hey, by the way, in this dump that had racetrack credentials or data, your data was also there. And we can alert them of that before anything bad happens. This is very similar to like the Uber breach. So racetrack was actually compromised through a vulnerability that they didn't patch. But this is an example here where you could see somebody's account that was for sale. Someone that had access to racetrack.okta.com had their login and password, as you can see by the plus signs next to each of those, where Stealer malware captured those details and then listed them for sale back in January for as little as $1. It's like a way of signing in, like a
kind of thing.
And you can see this is the actual view of the source itself, where you can see if we purchase this from the market, you have the actual files that you would reveal once you pay the fee. You would get these files and then get the information that was leaked. I have an example. I redacted information. I put my own stuff in here. These are things that I buy all the time, where you can see if you purchase it, it reveals the URL. So it would have been racetrack.okta.com. And then you can see the username, my very bad password of my dictionary password, so on and so forth. So the benefits of using a premium tool like a Cybersixgill, for example, is that, again, you save a lot of time by accessing all of these sources at once, rather than logging into sources, not finding the intel that you need. You can get that intel right away without wasting all that time. Easily monitor those threat actors moving forward. So now that you know what threat actors are targeting you, you can keep track of all of their activity and be alerted to that as soon as they post something new targeting you or somebody in your industry, whatever the case might be. So I promised a little something extra. This is some research that my colleague and I did just in the past few weeks. It's not just data leaks, it's not just vulnerabilities and things like that that are available in the underground. Threat actors are sharing the actual tools that they're using to compromise you. So my colleague and I downloaded one of these tools, and it's actually an open source tool. You might be familiar with it. It's called OpenBullet. In this version, it's OpenBullet 2. It's a web pen testing type tool, but threat actors use it for credential stuffing. So I used our own data to get access to, or we downloaded the tool, and then I used our own data to see why are threat actors using this tool. And it turns out it's because they basically can copy and paste everything that they get off of the dark web, the underground, put it in this tool, and then it's just push and play from there. And I demonstrated that because I'm not very good at it, but I was able to do it myself. Just shows you that any script kiddie can basically do this and start collecting credentials or ways into your network. Again, I have tutorials for this as well. It's an open source tool. But the Underground hosts all the pieces of information that you need to use this tool. So you need a config, you need combo list, which is basically just text files of a username, another text file of passwords. You combine those both and you see which one gives you some hits. And then you need a target, racetrack, Netflix, whatever, Amazon. You know, the typical places that threat actors are trying to get access to. They're trying to take over their ex-girlfriend's Facebook accounts, things like that. That's real. I see that all the time. And here's an example. This was just in a month time frame. There was 101,000 results of threat actors sharing those two things, the configs and the combo list for OpenBolt. That just shows you how prevalent this tool is in the Underground and how frequently threat actors are using this to try and get access to your networks. So how easy is it? Well, I'll show you. Again, this is something I can do, so any threat actor could do. All right. So I open up my attack box here. This is Kali, and right now we're gonna start our instance of OpenBullet, just in the command line here or in the terminal, running some Kali commands to turn on OpenBullet. It's very easy to use. I'm a GUI guy. You don't see me playing around the terminal too much. OpenBullet comes with a GUI, SAS, which is great. As you can see, there's a bunch of things on the left-hand side, a bunch of different tools you can use. But the first thing we need is a config. So we need to tell OpenBullet what to do. So we're going to create an HTTP request to a site. In this case, I forget the tool, the site's called. It's a marketplace like testing site where you just test your online market, your online tool. We build a config. We need to now load in a combo list, which again, is just a list of usernames and passwords. I have 3 here to make it easy. But you could put 1,000, you could put 10,000 in there. And then we're going to upload that to the tool. You can see there's my word list. We're going to create a job. So we're going to now load that combo list into the config, and we're going to target that site. I press play. It is now running that combo list over at that. It's targeting that URL or that site and is iterating over that combo list to look for matched accounts. You can see the 3rd account in the combo list came back as a success. That is a valid username and credential combination. So now I can take it, I can go log into that site and get access to whatever information. It's an e-commerce site, so I can potentially get their credit card information, their physical address, link it to their other accounts, things like that. And that's it. That's how easy it is to use a tool like that. That is a real tool that threat actors are using every single day. Maybe next time I'll do something like a stealer malware.
It only works on HTTP. It work on HTTP.
It works on others as well. HTTP was the easiest one for me to do. Just a few more slides here. Oh, and that's it actually. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, if we run out of time and you have any more questions, please reach out to me. You'll also see a link to our company website, Cybersixgill.com, if you want to learn more. So please take that. I'll get your request. I'd be happy to talk to any of you about any of the questions you have, or if you're just curious for more information. This is the tutorial drive. So I have 4 files in there now with tutorials and the videos that you saw. I will have to give you access, so I will get your request. I'll give you timed access to it so you can get those. The PowerPoint will be in there later today as well. And at future conferences, I'll be at other conferences as well. We will add more tutorials to that So just keep an eye on it.
I'm not gonna crack.
You can do it. Send me a LinkedIn message. I'll send you.
I mean, I'm not that.
Another virtual machine now and find out, right?
It's a good way to get in. You went to the building to stop with it.
So I was running a VM inside. So the judge not charged. Great. Great.
Until you figure out what you like. That was actually really
Yeah, no, I'm not against it. Like I said, they almost got me.
Sometimes so.
How are you?
His initial action was MND for sale. Just based on what we're I will answer it. Just I can get a membership with anything for you. Most of the time, that was not a membership. Right after. There were times when you
This is Mike Moore.
They're selling something they want. I get samples. Right, there's more. Actually, so it's case by case. Well, things like initial this so you better
Years, 32 days.
yeah, absolutely.
Aaron. Integrated approach, right?
Yeah, I don't I use any machine that I have access to. I just, something like that.